In the last 40 years, technology has moved us from an earthbound existence straight into the outer reaches of space. And now that technological know-how is being used to try and unravel the UFO mystery. John Schuessler is a mechanical engineer for McDonnell Douglas and NASA. Here at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Schuessler has worked on several space programs, including Skylab and the Space Shuttle. Schuessler's lifelong interest in UFOs prompted him to bring together other interested aerospace workers and form a group called VISIT.
Our Project VISIT is a very unique organization in that our acronym stands for Vehicle Internal Systems Investigative Team. And by that we mean that UFOs, if they exist, must have internal systems, as do our spacecraft, such as the Space Shuttle. We feel that by investigating cases where there are unique attributes such as medical injuries, abductions, trace effects, materials, metals, photographs, anything technological, that we can take the end result and model it, backtrack, and define and design exactly what happened.
Over the past several months, Schuessler and his group have accumulated a file of 100 cases of UFO encounters in which people were injured. One of the most intriguing cases that Schuessler and his group are investigating involves these women, Betty Cash, Vickie Landrum, and Vickie's grandson, Colby. In December of 1980, the three of them encountered an unusual object on the outskirts of Houston.
We had been driving out this country road, which it is a very desolate area, and all of a sudden we seen this object. So I didn't know whether to stop, to back up, keep going, or what. So we just kept driving. We thought, well, maybe it's an air balloon or something, you know, weather balloon or something. But the closer we got, we could tell that either it was going to be us or it, because it kept getting lower and getting hotter.
And this object come down almost to the treetops, almost ahead of us, and I screamed for Betty to stop. And I think if she hadn't stopped and we went on under it, we would have burned up. I got out in the car, Colby and me, for about, I guess, a minute or two, and he was screaming like he was trying to get away from me and then pulling me back in the car, and I got back in the car, and Betty walked to the head of the car.
I thought it was the end of time, because I've always been taught the Bible says the world will be destroyed by fire, hell and brimstone. Well, how did I know that the hell and brimstone wasn't right there with it? And as hot as it was, if hell is any hotter, God forbid I want to live a good life, because it was just almost unbearable.
I kept trying to calm Colby, and I couldn't. I had to tell him something that would calm him, and I said, if you see this big man come out of it, it'd be Jesus.
Well, I just had a feeling to look up in the sky. Then I looked around a little bit more and I saw that object. It looked like a diamond. It lit up the whole sky.
It was a grayish, metallic-looking color, but yet the flames that was throwing out was a reddish, yellowish-looking glow.
Besides the strange object, they all claim to have seen several helicopters hovering around it.
Just about the minute that I got up close enough to really make the shape of the object, whatever it is, the helicopters were there.
We was amazed at, you know, what kind of helicopters there were. We were about scared to death. The double rotary kind of helicopters, I never saw one before.
Whatever they saw that night, the physical impact was immediate. Within hours, they were suffering from severe headaches, diarrhea, and vomiting. Betty Cash had the worst symptoms.
Her main problem at that time was severe headache, swelling of the face, swelling of the eyelids, and the swelling of the skull, that is the top of the head.
The fear of ridicule kept Betty from telling about her UFO encounter. But weeks later, when patches of her hair started falling out, she told her doctor about the incident. Specialists were brought in, including a dermatologist and a radiologist, to run tests. They all turned up negative. John Schuessler and his group started their own investigation several months later. Despite the inconclusive medical reports, Schuessler believes that all 3 victims received some kind of radiation exposure caused by the UFO.
It's a package of symptoms that all 3 had, and all 3 being different kinds of people. That's the significant thing, from their age, the past history, medical history, etc. But they all had common symptoms. The common symptoms all manifested themselves right after the incident, starting within hours.
And what about the helicopters that were supposedly hovering around the object? Schuessler's investigators found other witnesses who saw them.
The helicopters must have been military if they existed. That has to be a given. There are no civilian operations of CH-47 Chinook-type helicopters in the Houston or Gulf Coast area.
Major Dennis Hare is a commander with the National Guard at Ellington Air Force Base near Houston. He says none of the Chinooks in his unit flew the night of the incident.
I personally was not up in the air that night, and to the best of my knowledge, no member of my unit or the aircraft that's under my command were up in the air on that particular date.
A fleet of helicopters, an unidentified flying object, and 3 victims who were injured by it. What do they all add up to? No one is sure. Schuessler and his group think that one possible explanation is that our government may have been testing a secret aircraft that night, powered by some type of microwave propulsion system. The craft may have gone out of control, almost touching down when Betty, Vickie, and Colby saw it.
They have what would normally be seen from a heavy dose of microwave and possibly an X-ray component. And we do know that pulsed microwave gives off an X-ray component.
But if the military is involved, they deny it.
Citizens of the United States were subjected to chemical exposures, radiation exposures, and various other things over the past 30 years at different times in the interest of research or military operations. And a lot of those people kept saying, hey, look, I was hurt. Believe me, I was hurt. And everybody said, you're crazy. It couldn't have happened.
As for Betty and Vickie, they still suffer from hypersensitivity to heat.
I do expect them to take care of my medical bills and what I have had to go through with and what I'm still going through with and what I may have to continue for years.
I don't believe in the little green men and all of that stuff from outer space. But if it's something that people don't know about, and it slipped in here and did that to us, and the government say they don't know about it when they had the helicopters up there, we in a terrible shape. Because if it can happen to us, it could happen to a whole city.
A postscript to the case. Vickie and Betty have filed suit against the federal government, attempting to win compensation for their injuries. They remain firmly convinced that whatever it was they saw, it was attached to the United States military. After pressure from a Texas congressman, the U.S. Air Force sent its own special investigator to look into the matter. His report states that he was unable to find any connection whatsoever between the UFO and any branch of the U.S. military. And so the case remains unsolved, but it does raise some questions. Is it possible that some unidentified flying objects could be secret U.S. military test planes? And if so, what recourse do citizens have if they are injured by them?